I'm Shoestring Jane and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about some of the frugal books that I have found incredibly inspiring over the years and those that I go back to time and time again. There are some that all of the ones that I'm going to show you I just wouldn't get rid of because I do go back and refer and refresh myself and get some inspiration from them from time to time again. So these are books that I have mostly, all but one, bought the physical book because although I can get things digitally, I do have a Kindle, I prefer a physical book still, and it's quite nice. This is why I end up with lots of books on my bookshelf and need to have a declutter, but it's quite nice to keep some and keep referring to them. So today I'm going to go through the different books that have inspired me on frugality over the years. My first one is number one because it's my favourite. I mean, it's an absolute classic. I don't have the complete one now, but I do have this one, the Tightwad Gazette. I'm going to say if you're going to purchase this, buy the complete Tightwad Gazette that's got absolutely all of Amy Dashin, I think you pronounce her name. No, it's Decision. That's right. She actually makes a point of saying that in the book. Amy Decision. The Tightwad Gazette was written in the early 90s, a time where there was a crash and a bit of a depression and a recession as well. And I think I bought this copy then, and then I upgraded to the complete one, which I've lent to somebody, and I don't know who I've lent it to. But it is just brilliant. It's so inspiring. She shows you what you can do with very little. I mean, they were desperate for a big family. They wanted a nice big house in the country. I think property prices then, and certainly probably now in America, are a lot cheaper than ours, particularly if you want something a bit out of the way and a house that you're prepared to do up yourself. So they bought a big doer-upper, and she stayed at home with the children, and they lived an extremely frugal lifestyle. And it's a real foundation. If you're just starting out on this lifestyle and you want to save money, you do find that they're quite expensive now, but it is such an investment. Get somebody to buy it for Christmas is such a good investment of money. The Complete Tightwad Gazette by Amy Decision. That's how you pronounce it. That was one of the first books I bought. Another one that kind of came out at a similar time and has been updated since, this is the original one that I've got, is the Penny Pinchers book by John and Irma Musto. And this is actually a UK book, and it's got a lot of the same types of tips as the Tightwad Gazette, but it's set out almost in like little sentences, like it's tips. It's a series of tips. But it's quite kind of easy to read and witty, whereas Amy Decision was actually a graphic designer, so she's done loads of really fabulous illustrations in hers, just simple illustrations. It was actually, I should have said on this one, it's called the Tightwad Gazette because it was based on a newsletter that she wrote, and people could subscribe to the newsletter. One of my blog readers of shoestringcottage.com actually sent me some copies of the original newsletter quite some time ago, so this was how they were, and she's pulled them together into her book. But it's just brilliant. It's so worth having. This is another one that if you can pick it up secondhand, and most of mine were secondhand, I think nearly all of mine were secondhand copies. It's worth having. It's a classic. It has been updated, so you might get an updated version, but it's still all relevant, even though it's quite old. It's still relevant to the money saver and people embracing frugality for the first time. Another one, this is well thumbed and absolutely knackered. I think it was a little grubby when I got it, but it's certainly grubbier. I think it's been by my bedside table and had coffee cups and things put on it. Your Money or Your Life. 9 Steps to Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Achieving Financial Independence by Vicky Robin and Joe Dominguez. And again, this is quite old. It's another classic. It's been around for quite a long time. Since the 90s, it's been updated since. But it has some really good principles in here about really tracking your money, really knowing where it's going, but also thinking about the value of your working time, your working hours, and putting a value on your hours so that you think before you spend money on something, how much of your life energy in terms of working hours is it going to take? And I had never really thought of it like that before. And I think it's a really useful way to think about money and spending money is whatever you buy, it's because of the effort you've put into working for that money. So they talk about it in terms of your life energy. It's really good to think of it like that, because sometimes that will really stop you spending. You think, well, okay, yes, it would be lovely to have a hot tub in the garden, but how many hours do I have to work to get that? Is that something that we really need? And it can really change the way you think about money. It is a kind of workbook. You do have to work through it. It has exercises and things. So it's an investment of your time as well as your money, but it's very worth having. Another book that's really good for showing you how you can do it is this one by Kath Kelly, How I Lived a Year on Just £1 a Day. It's a really good book. It was from 2008 or 2006, late 2000s anyway. And it just, she was broke. She wanted to save up for her brother's wedding, and she had hardly any resources. So she decided she was going to live for £1 a day. That's after her rent and her bills and nothing else. That was all her food, all her clothing, her transport, everything after the basics of paying rent and bills. And it's kind of story. It's a story of her year. It shows the different events that she went through, how she manages things like social occasions, how she gets free stuff, how she gets free entertainment, finds free talks, free events, how she got her friends on board, and her friends were all fairly broke too, so that kind of made it easier. How she bought everything yellow stickered, and then the perils of buying everything yellow stickered because there was lots of cakes and bread within that, and how she then had to scale back. She was putting on weight. But, it's a very inspiring book. It shows you what you can do. Whether you could live on £1 a day now or this time later, I don't know. But it's just an interesting exercise. It shows you how she had to be creative to get by. She walked everywhere, she hitchhiked, she cycled, she camped. She lived a kind of good life and a fun life, but on a bare bones budget. So that's a really good one to have. And along a similar sort of lines, The Moneyless Man, A Year of Freakonomic Living by Mark Boyle. Mark Boyle's a really interesting person, and if you Google him or put him into YouTube, you can find a couple of interviews with him. He now lives in the middle of Ireland. I think he did Ben Fogle did a interview with him for New Lives in the Wild, although he's been doing it for a long time. He lives in the middle of nowhere in the Irish countryside now on practically nothing, with no internet and, just living on practically nothing. But, it was made possible probably from the sales of this book. But when he started out writing this book, he didn't really have a lot to go on, and he ended up blagging a free caravan that someone was going to chuck out and living for free on a farm and working in order to have his caravan there, working on the farm, doing a few hours, growing his own food and cycling everywhere, and again, living for free. And both of these people didn't live for free by allowing other people to buy stuff for them and pay for them to do things. They just did without, or they found creative means of living on really just practically nothing. So, it is another one that's very, very inspiring and worth reading. Again, with all of these books, you can get them from the library. You don't have to buy them all. I've bought these over the years, and they're books that I like to refer to, but quite often I'll get a book from the library first, and if I like it and know I'm going to keep going back to it, then I'll buy it, and then I'll try and buy it second hand. So, it's worth having. My next book isn't a book on frugality as such. It's a book on living a really sustainable life. It's by Bea Johnson, and it's called Zero Waste Home. And it's a really interesting book, especially if you want to live more sustainably, you want to lower your carbon footprint, then you do well to read it, because she's a very inspiring lady. She's very determined. I mean, her family produces like a jam jar full of waste a year, which for most of us would be pretty impossible, and you've got to be pretty focused to live like that. And the upshot is, because they buy so much less stuff, and when they do, they buy second hand, and they do without a lot of things, is that it ends up being a frugal way to live, because it's a stance against our consumerist lifestyle, which is very of the moment, isn't it? So I think it's a really inspiring book, and if you want to tread more lightly on the planet, it's really worth reading. Bea Johnson, she's a very determined lady, as I say. And then moving away from the kind of saving money generally books to frugal food books. So I've got three that I go back to again and again. This one's a classic, Delias Frugal Food. This is not the original 1970s version. I actually do have the original 1970s version as well, but then my mum picked this up for me in the charity shop, and it's got the same recipes in it. It's been updated slightly, but it's got some interesting, like really nice food, but that is cheaper than generally. It's all about, cooking from scratch. So if you're really on a tight budget, there are recipes in here that I would never cook. I mean, it's just fallen open at shoulder of lamb stuffed with rice and olives. Shoulder of lamb is a real luxury food for me. I think lamb is very expensive, so I might not do that kind of thing. But then she does a lot of different things with sausages with lentils, bangers braised in cider. You can get sausages quite cheaply, pork sausages with cider sauce. And then she's got a whole load of veggie recipes as well. So curried egg and lentil patties, lentil and split pea loaf, lots of white bean, chickpea type things, Boston baked beans. So there are lots of really super cheap veggie recipes. Pancakes with spinach and cheese, those kind of things. There are really a lot on there in here. How to make your own pizza dough. And there's a few that I go back to. Her macaroni cheese recipe is really good in here, so I'll go back to that quite time and time again. It tells you different ways to buy meat as well, and how you can pick up cheaper joints of meat, and how buying a whole chicken, for example, is cheaper than buying the individual sections of a chicken. So that is a good book if you see it, and I would say that's the kind of thing that pops up secondhand regularly. But on Delia's website, you can get a lot of recipes for free, obviously. So if you just put in frugal food, you'll get a lot of recipes from her website. Another one, I'm not a massive fan of Jamie, but I do think that this is a good book, Save with Jamie. I picked this up for a couple of pounds in the charity shop. Shop smart, cook clever, waste less. It's set up so that you might buy a whole chicken and have it for your Sunday roast, and then he tells you all the different things you can cook with the leftovers. But it's got some other really good recipes, like his chicken tray bakes, and that kind of thing are very good in here, and they don't cost very much. So it's got some nice, inspiring recipes. So again, it might start. So you've splashed out and you've bought your roast pork for Sunday, but he shows you how to use it. Like, you would keep the pork dripping and use it. Don't throw it away. This is something you can use. And then you might make a pizza pie and put some pork on that. And it's lots of different things that you can do. Dim sum pork buns, and some nice illustrations as well. So it shows you how to stretch the food. It'll give you some inspiration. And then it's got some things like, happy and hearty Scottish broth and pies and salads. And again, he's got some vegetarian type things that are good. So I would say that's a worthwhile investment if you find it secondhand. A lot of these cookery books, if you keep looking, you'll find them secondhand. I even found this one secondhand, and this is one of my favourite cookbooks. I don't like Jack Monroe's, all her subsequent ones so much, but this one I think is a really good basis. So this is where Jack started from. She's not a girl called Jack anymore, so it just should be called Cooking with Jack or something, shouldn't it? A person called Jack. So it's 100 delicious budget recipes. And these are when Jack Monroe was, she wrote these when she was really down on her uppers. She was a mum of a small child living on very little. And there's some really great recipes that I go back to again and again that don't involve lots of fancy ingredients, but maybe have been adapted from a fancier recipe to start with. Like, there's a version of coq au vin in here, which I just love, and there's a kind of creamy chicken dish as well. And a lot of, I don't like this one personally, but a lot of people mention this to me. Creamy salmon pasta with a chili lemon kick, and the salmon is just made with a jar of salmon paste, so you can keep it really cheap. A jar of salmon paste is not expensive, is it? Wouldn't be my favourite thing. I prefer the vegetarian and vegan things in here. There's mushroom chasseur and mushroom mushroom chasseur, which is red wine, and then a mushroom, I can't remember where it's gone, a creamy mushroom, stroganoff, mushroom stroganoff, which again I go back to loads. So it's really classic. If you can pick this book up, A Girl Called Jack, then do. Again, a lot of these recipes are on the website now. I'm trying to think. Bootstrap Cook. Jack Monroe is now Bootstrap Cook, so I think that's the latest cookbook as well, which I have got, but again I don't use it as much, I don't like it as much. This is a really good basic one. So those are some of my favourites that I've got physically, but I must also mention Dave Ramsey, Total Money Makeover is a really, really good book, particularly if you aren't very good with money and you want to learn a bit about personal finance. Some of it is very much US based, but most of it is applicable wherever you are. I've lent it to my daughter, which is why I don't have the copy here. But it's very, very good if you've got debts to deal with first, and takes you through what he calls his baby steps. So you're paying off debts, you're going for the debt that costs you the most money in terms of interest, doing one debt at a time, gradually, getting your debts into or trying to cut those, and then saving an emergency fund. Well, actually, I think you might save the emergency fund first. So you need to have an emergency fund so you don't have more debt, and then gradually taking you through the process of investing in your pension and other investments and increasing and building your wealth. And there are lots, if you look at Dave, if you Google him and look on his website, he has a channel as well on YouTube, and you can see lots of examples of people that had thousands and thousands of pounds, like hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of debt. They've followed Dave Ramsey's method and they've completely cut their debt in not many years, so it's a really good book. It's very inspiring. And the other one, I followed the blog first, was Meet the Frugal Woods. So initially on their blog, the Frugal Woods, it was a young couple who both had quite decent paying jobs, but they really, really wanted to retire early. They wanted to find a big house in the country, retire early, have a family. So they were anonymous to begin with. They were still in their high paying jobs. But since then, Elizabeth Willard Thomas, the female of the couple, has written this book, Meet the Frugal Woods. And I had this free. I did a Kindle free month. You get a free sign up month, can't you? And I got it for free on there and read it. And it's a really great read. It's so easy to read. It just is inspiring. So if you're interested in the FIRE movement, so financial independence, retire early, this couple are a kind of leading lights, if you like, and very inspiring. And they live very frugally. They still live frugally now because now they're making their money last, but they've retired. They live in this beautiful place in the country. They've got 2 children now, I think. So it's very good. The blog is also good, worth checking out. So those are the books that I go back to again and again. If I'm feeling a bit uninspired or I feel like I want to spend money on pointless things, I will go and pick one of these books and just have a little look through, get some inspiration and some sort of fresh invigoration, if you like, some fresh energy towards my frugal goals. So anyway, I'm sorry if this video is out of sync. I don't know what's going on with my internet today, so it's all a bit slow. But hopefully you could just listen rather than trying to watch and make my lips match up with my words. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. There will be 2 videos a week going forward, so if you want to know when they're coming up, hit your notifications bell, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. No Amazon links included here. Buy from your local bookshop or second hand.